The cold, sterile air of the operating room always smelled like fear and bleach, a familiar perfume to Dr. Alistair Finch. He was the most celebrated cardiac surgeon on the East Coast, but today, staring through the thick glass of the viewing gallery, a fissure of dread opened up inside him. The patient, 24-year-old Clara, was on the table for a routine pacemaker battery replacement. Her file showed a highly invasive, yet undocumented, surgery 2 years prior. As the primary surgeon's scalpel made the initial incision, exposing the pacemaker, Alistair felt a tremor. The device was newer than the records indicated, and tucked underneath the casing, barely visible against the ribs, was a sliver of dark, foreign metal. It looked less like medical equipment and more like a hidden message. Alistair realized this theater was not just a place of healing. It was a crime scene. The river was a pulse of Havenwood, a slow, dark beat beneath the town surface. It flowed through the valley, not with the clean rush of a mountain stream, but with the weary, patient churn of something that carried history and refuse alike. The air was cold, but the chill that sank into Ben Carter's bones had little to do with the weather. It was a kind of cold that came from a deeper knowing, a premonition that always seemed to precede the worst days in uniform. "Easy, boy," Ben murmured, his voice a low, steady rumble, the only counterpoint to the insistent huff-huff of Rex's powerful breathing. Rex's nose was inches from the waterline, his tail held stiffly, vibrating with concentration. Ben had trained Rex, a retired military working dog. Since he was a pup, he knew the dog's signals better than his own reflection. That low-pitched, guttural whine was not for trash. It was for human scent. The debris lay lodged against a snag of old willow roots just 20 feet downstream from the patrol car. Ben pulled a pair of nitrile gloves from his pocket. The squeak of the plastic a loud intrusion in the stillness. He stepped carefully down the muddy bank, his eyes scanning the water. "Show me, partner," he said. Rex didn't need the command. He nudged a patch of submerged matter with his nose. Ben crouched, dipping his hand into the shockingly cold water. His fingers brushed against a coarse, synthetic fabric. He pulled it free, and the object dripped black river water onto the mud. It was a woman's handbag, not a cheap imitation, but a well-made, dark leather satchel, the kind that held weight both physical and emotional. It was waterlogged, heavy, and already losing its color to pervasive rot of the river. The clasp was a tarnished silver buckle, and when Ben gently pried it open, a cloud of silk billowed out. Inside, everything was soaked, warped, and stained. A driver's license. The photo of a woman with strikingly bright, skeptical eyes staring out from the warped plastic. Her name, Eliza Thorne. Age, 32. Address, a street in Havenwood, a modest, well-maintained home that Ben vaguely remembered from a few calls for neighborhood disputes. Also inside, a wallet with a few $100s in soggy cash, a half-empty pack of expensive European cigarettes, and a small, worn photograph. The photo was of Eliza, much younger, laughing with a man whose back was mostly to the camera, but Ben recognized the thick-set shoulders and the familiar, too-short haircut. It was Sheriff Dale Jensen. Ben felt a familiar, sickening lurch in his stomach. Dale Jensen had been his training officer, his boss, and until 6 months ago, his confidant. Their relationship, built on years of shared midnight patrols and the unspoken burden of being the only two men standing between the quiet violence of the valley and the fragile peace of the town, had been a bedrock of his life. But Dale had changed. After the death of his wife, a long, drawn-out illness that hollowed Dale out, he'd become withdrawn, paranoid, and occasionally frighteningly volatile. The man in the picture was Dale before the grief, before the drink. Ben pocketed the picture and the license, careful to keep them separate from the rest of the evidence. He stood, his gaze sweeping the river. A few paces further, Rex was digging at the mud, whining excitedly. "What is it, Rex?" Another clue. Rex began to bark, a sharp, insistent series of reports that were all business. Ben followed the dog. The bank here dropped off sharply. Ben peered over the edge. The water here was deeper, its surface slick and still like black glass. Rex stopped barking and pointed his nose directly at the river, letting out the lowest, most chilling sound Ben had ever heard from him, a long, mournful howl, not of fear, but profound, immediate distress. The hair on the back of Ben's neck stood up "You're telling me something is in the water, aren't you, old man?" Ben whispered, his voice catching. He knelt, his flashlight beam slicing the gloom. The water was too dark to see anything but a vague, deeper shadow near the bank. He reached for his radio, his hand hovering over the transmit button. Standard procedure would be to call in the find, secure the scene, and wait for the dive team. But the picture of Dale and the terrible urgency in Rex's cry told him that standard procedure might allow something vital to be lost, or worse, moved. Ben stripped off his heavy patrol jacket. He clipped the radio in his sidearm to back of his belt, securing them high. He looked at Rex, whose brown eyes were locked on his. "Stay. Guard," Ben commanded. The dog's ears flattened slightly, a small protest, but he immediately backed up a few steps and settled into a tense, rigid stance, his gaze fixed on the water. Ben plunged into the icy cold. The shock was immediate and paralyzing, stealing his breath. The water seized him, a suffocating, heavy embrace. He forced himself deeper, fighting the instinct to scramble back to the air. The river bottom was slick, a carpet of cold, thick mud and submerged debris. He kicked his feet, moving a few feet to where Rex had indicated. His outstretched hand hit something hard, surprisingly smooth and heavy. He gripped it, his fingers closing around a thick plastic handle. He pulled. It didn't budge. It was anchored, heavy, impossibly solid. Ben took a deep breath, pushing his head underwater. He opened his eyes, the murk obscuring everything. He let his hands explore, his fingers sifting through the silt. The object was a thick-gauge, plastic-lined laundry hamper, the kind common in student dorms and older homes. It was weighted down by what felt like concrete blocks lashed to the sides with thick rope. He surfaced, gasping, the cold water streaming from his face. "It's a container!" he choked out at Rex, who was pacing frantically on the bank. With a surge of adrenaline, Ben dove again. This time, he located the rope binding the lid shut. His frozen fingers fumbled, but finally he got enough purchase to begin untying the complex knot, one painstaking, agonizing tug at a time. The cold was beginning to dull his limbs, a dangerous sign. He broke the surface again, a ragged, desperate cough tearing through his chest. One last dive. He descended, heart hammering against his ribs. He felt the knot give. He hauled up on the lid of the hamper, the suction of the water making it almost impossible. When the lid finally cracked open, it released a horrifying bloom of disturbed silt and organic matter. Ben didn't need to see clearly. The water inside the container was warmer than the river around it, a perverse, sickening sign of what the river had preserved. His hand brushed against human hair, long, dark, and floating with an unnatural weightlessness. He didn't wait. He didn't think. He simply gripped the edge of the hamper and, with a final, desperate, muscle-burning heave, dragged the entire, waterlogged weight of the object toward the bank. He scrambled onto the muddy shore, pulling the hamper after him, collapsing onto his knees, shivering violently. Rex immediately ran to him, licking his face with worried desperation. Ben stared at the object. The laundry hamper lay half open. Inside, curled into a fetal position, was the body of a woman. She was clad in a simple cotton nightdress, and her strikingly bright, skeptical eyes, the same eyes from the driver's license, were wide open, staring blankly at the fog-choked sky. It was Eliza Thorne. Her face was peaceful, almost serene, but around her neck, deeply embedded in the soft skin, was the dark, precise ligature mark of a rope or cord. Ben retched, turning his head away from the sight, the bile rising in his throat. He forced himself to look back, focusing on the details. The body was unnaturally preserved by the cold water, but there was something else. Pressed tightly against the lining of the hamper, Ben saw a small, bright flash of color. He reached in, his hand shaking, and pulled out a delicate, silver-plated cufflink, its face inset with a dark, polished piece of obsidian. It was a piece of jewelry Ben had seen 100 times. Dale Jensen wore an identical pair on formal occasions, a gift from his late wife. The air seemed to compress around Ben. The smell of the river, the cold, the sight of the woman, it all fused into a single, overwhelming certainty. His former mentor, his friend, the sheriff of Havenwood, had not just known this woman. He had almost certainly killed her and dumped her in the Black River. Ben staggered his feet, pulling the radio from his belt. He had to call this in. He had to report the discovery of a body and the possible involvement of the county sheriff. He looked down at the cufflink in his hand. If he reported the cufflink now, the case would be officially tied to Dale from the first moment, contaminating the evidence, bringing in the state police and the corruption of political maneuvering before he could secure anything. Dale, knowing he was exposed, might run, or worse, lash out. He remembered the photo in the wallet, the look of young, vibrant love between Dale and Eliza. What had happened to turn that love into this horrifying act? What secret did Eliza Thorne carry that Dale felt needed to be drowned in the dark river? Ben made a decision. It was not a choice he was proud of, or one that followed any protocol. It was a choice born of a desperate fear for the integrity of the truth. He placed the cufflink carefully inside his damp glove and slipped it into his pocket, evidence of his own immediate betrayal of protocol. He then turned on his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 102. I'm at the old covered bridge, Black River. Code 30 confirm." Ben's voice was steady professional, betraying none of the turmoil within him. "Code 30 confirmed, DOA. Copy 102. Code 30 confirmed. Send immediate resources, dive team, coroner, and forensic unit. I also need to speak with Sheriff Jensen immediately. Do not contaminate the scene. Stand by for command." He looked down at the pale, still face of Eliza Thorne. Her eyes, wide open, seemed to be asking a question. "I promise, Eliza," Ben whispered, not to the body, but to the suffocating silence of the river valley. "I will find out what happened. I'll make sure he pays." He couldn't use the radio for the next vital communication. Not yet. He walked back to the car, retrieved his phone, and dialed a number he hadn't called in 6 months. It belonged to the only person in Havenwood who had ever told him the cold, hard truth, even when it hurt. He watched Rex stand guard, the K-9 a silent, magnificent statue of loyalty and grief, staring fixedly at the hamper. A small voice picked up on the third ring. "Hello? Ben." "Maria," Ben said, the name sounding rough on his cold lips. "It's me. I need your help. I found something. It's bad, Maria. Very bad." Maria Vargas was a reporter for the Havenwood Courier and, 6 months ago, Ben's fiancée. She was the one who had exposed the corruption in the county zoning board that Dale Jensen had, allegedly, been covering up. The fallout had caused Ben his relationship with Maria and his faith in his mentor. "Where are you?" Maria's voice was sharp, professional, instantly shifting into reporter mode. But underneath it, Ben heard the tremor of old affection and fear. "Covered bridge. I found a body. The woman Maria, she's connected to Dale." He didn't say how, not over the phone. "Ben, you have to be careful." "What is it? What did you find?" "I found a body. Eliza Thorne. And I found proof that connects the sheriff directly to her death." He paused, his heart pounding an insistent rhythm against his ribs. "I didn't log all the evidence. I need you to meet me. Now, before Dale gets here." He heard her sharp intake of breath. "I'm on my way. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. Just wait for me." Ben hung up the phone, the cold metal warm in his hand. He looked across the river, the fog beginning to burn off, revealing the dark, silent depths of the valley. He had crossed a line, a legal and moral chasm. He had protected a piece of evidence that incriminated his boss, and he had called the one person who could weaponize that evidence, the woman who had broken his heart. The quiet life he had built was over. It had drowned, just like Eliza Thorne in the Black River. Before you continue on with Ben's story, if this blend of raw emotion and high-stakes thriller is the kind of story you crave, consider sharing it. It helps keep the search for the truth going. Ben zipped his thick patrol jacket back on, pulling his collar high against a persistent chill. He walked slowly back to the river's edge, keeping his back to the road. The first siren was a distant, mournful cry, a sound that always promised help but often only delivered bureaucratic cleanup. He had minutes. He looked at the hamper, at Eliza. He didn't know her, but he felt the weight of her unfinished life, the terrible, lonely injustice of her death. He looked down at Rex. "It's all right, boy. Good work. Now we wait." The dog pressed his head against Ben's knee, a silent, comforting presence, the only witness to Ben's agonizing, treasonous choice. The first car to arrive wasn't the state police or the coroner. It was a black, unmarked sedan, slick with dew. Out stepped Sheriff Dale Jensen. He was a tall man, still powerfully built despite the years, but his face was lined with profound, almost skeletal fatigue. His uniform was immaculate, his movements sharp and precise. A man who still commanded respect, but whose eyes held the weary, watchful quality of a caged animal. Dale walked directly to the riverbank, his boots crunching on the gravel. He looked at the hamper, at the body inside, and then his eyes, cold and dark, fixed on Ben. There was no surprise in his expression, only a terrible, weary resignation. Ben, Dale's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Tell me what you found. Ben met his gaze, his heart a small, frantic thing against his ribs. Sheriff, I found a waterlogged handbag on the snag, about 20 feet down. ID inside identified the victim as Eliza Thorne, resident of Havenwood. Rex then alerted to this hamper, weighted down and submerged near the bank. She died of strangulation, sir. The ligature mark is clear. Ben delivered the report in the precise, clinical language of law enforcement, a shield against the tidal wave of emotion. He did not mention the photograph or the cufflink. Dale walked over, his shadow falling over the hamper. He didn't look at Eliza's face. He looked at the thick rope that had bound the hamper closed. He knelt, one hand brushing the muddy water, still clinging to the plastic. No need for a dive team, then, Dale murmured, almost himself. He stood up, turning his full attention back to Ben. Good work, Ben. You secured the scene? Yes, sir. I didn't touch anything after pulling the hamper out. I called in a code 30. Forensic and coroner should be here in under 20 minutes. Dale nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. You're a good officer, Ben. Always been a good man. You know how these things go. State police is going to come down here like a plague. We need to be careful what gets out, Ben, for the department's sake. For my sake. The implication hung in the damp air between them, heavy and corrupt. What did you see, Ben? What did you decide to keep quiet? I understand, Sheriff, Ben replied, his voice carefully neutral. He knew that Dale was testing him, feeling out the limits of his loyalty. Just then, a flash of red and silver caught Ben's eye. Maria's beat-up old sedan, the paint chipped and faded, was pulling up at the edge of the access road, 50 yards away. She got out, clutching a notepad and a camera bag, her face pale but determined. Dale followed Ben's gaze. His eyes narrowed, and the look of weary resignation was replaced by a quick, terrifying flare of anger. What is she doing here? Dale's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Did you call Maria Vargas, Ben? That vulture? After everything that happened? After what she did to the department, to us? Ben felt the cold, hard certainty of his choice solidify in his gut. This was it, the moment of truth. She's a local journalist, Sheriff. She covers all the major incidents, Ben said, forcing a calm he didn't feel. Dale moved with sudden, frightening speed, covering the distance between them in 3 long strides. He stopped inches from Ben, his tall frame looming. Rex let out a low, warning growl, but Dale ignored the dog. Don't lie to me, Ben. Not now. I know you too. You called her. What did you tell her? Did you find something you thought I shouldn't see? Dale's voice was a controlled snarl, full of the raw, dangerous grief Ben had been watching for 6 months. Ben held his gaze, refusing to back down, the image of the silver cufflink burning behind his eyelids. I told her exactly what I told you, Sheriff, that I found a body. Eliza Thorne. Ben stood his ground, the cold water still clinging to his uniform. Dale studied him for a long, agonizing moment, his eyes searching Ben for the flicker of deceit. He then stepped back, a slow, terrifying smile twisting his lips. All right, Ben. Good. You're still one of mine. Now you go talk to Maria. Tell her this is a routine drowning, pending full autopsy. Tell her to back off until the state police arrive. Get her off my crime scene. Dale's words were a clear command, a final test of loyalty. As Ben watched Maria begin her careful walk toward the river, he knew he had only one play. He had given Maria the evidence. Now, he had to give her the time. Yes, Sheriff, Ben said, a single, decisive lie that severs loyalty to the man standing before him. I'll get her out of here. He walked toward Maria, Rex at his heel, leaving Dale alone with the secrets of the black, unforgiving river. Ben walked toward Maria, the distance between them feeling like a mile. The air hummed with a tension sharper than the cold, and the sudden, frantic realization of his compromised position with a suffocating cloak. He was officially obstructing a homicide investigation by concealing evidence, the cufflink, and tipping off the press, Maria, all for the purpose of exposing the very man he was supposed to protect. Maria met him halfway up the bank. She was wearing a thick olive green coat, her dark hair pulled back in a practical, severe ponytail. Her eyes, usually warm and expressive, were wide with concern, darting between Ben's shivering, soaked uniform and the dark figure of Sheriff Dale Jensen by the river. Ben, you're freezing. What the hell happened? What's going on? She whispered, her voice tight. He didn't answer with words. He reached into his pocket and, pulling out the damp, silver cufflink still protected inside the glove, pressed it into her hand. He closed her fingers over the object. Don't let go of this, he muttered, his lips barely moving. It's Dale's. Obsidian inlay. It was inside the container with the body. He was her lover, Maria. They were together. Maria's breath hitched, a tiny, ragged sound. She looked down at the cufflink, then back up at Ben, her eyes blazing with a mixture of shock and cold, professional fury. The sheriff? A murder victim? This is huge, Ben. This is dangerous. He knows I called you. He's standing right there, testing me. He told me to tell you it's a drowning and to leave the scene. Maria, you have maybe 5 minutes before the state police cars start rolling in and he has to start acting like a sheriff again. You need to take the cufflink, get back to your car, and get out of here. Find out everything you can about Eliza Thorne. Everything. Why was she killed now? And you? What are you going to do? She asked, her grip on the cufflink tight, her face pale. I'm going to stay and watch him. I need to know what he does next. I need to be the eyes and ears on the inside until I can find something else concrete, something that ties him to the motive, not just the body. Ben, she insisted, her voice dropping lower, if he finds out you held this back, he will ruin you. He could make this look like you planted evidence. He already suspects. I saw in his eyes. But he needs me to keep the scene secure and compliant until the state boys get here. I have a window. Go. He gave her a brief, urgent nod and turned, walking back toward the river. Rex, sensing the shift in the emotional climate, paced nervously but remained silent. Maria, her reporter instincts battling her profound fear, slipped the cufflink into a plastic evidence bag she pulled from her camera kit, then quickly returned to her car. Ben watched her tires spit gravel as she sped away, a silent promise exchanged between them. He returned to the riverbank just as the first county forensic van pulled up, followed quickly by the medical examiner's vehicle. Dale Jensen, composed and authoritative once more, was already barking orders into his radio, organizing a perimeter, his face now a mask of professional gravity. Carter, get over here. Maintain a 50-foot perimeter around the hamper. No civilian traffic, no unauthorized personnel. I need you to brief to me on what you found. Ben did as commanded, his mind working furiously. He kept his briefing clinical, focusing only on the when and where the discovery. Dr. Sylvia Vance, the medical examiner, a brusque, sharp woman in her 60s who tolerated no nonsense, knelt by the body, her expression grim. Strangulation, Dale. Vance pronounced, not even bothering with preliminaries. Textbook ligature mark. Submerged body. Cold water preserves. I'll give you a definitive time in the lab, but this woman has been dead at least 36 hours, maybe more. Dale sighed heavily, running a hand over his face. Damn it, a homicide in Havenwood. That's all we need. He looked genuinely distressed, a performance so seamless, Ben almost doubted himself. Almost. She's Eliza Thorne, Sheriff. I identified her from her license. Does the name ring a bell? Ben asked, testing the waters, watching Dale's reaction closely. Dale didn't flinch. Thorne. No, not immediately. Check the address, Carter. See if she reported anything suspicious recently. Any domestic issues. Ben pulled out his notebook, his hand steady. Will do, sir. He knew the address already. He knew the connection. The performance was exhausting. For the next few hours, Ben was absorbed into the controlled chaos of the crime scene. He talked to the state police investigators, 2 detectives, one named Harper, a lean, skeptical woman from the city, and her partner, Miller, a quiet, methodical man. They were polite, but their eyes held the thinly veiled contempt city cops reserved for small-town departments. Detective Harper took point. Officer Carter, you were first on the scene. Can you walk me through the discovery? Everything. Ben repeated his story, excluding the photograph and the cufflink, his omissions feeling like jagged, poisonous truths in his mouth. And you notice no other signs? No struggle on the bank? No vehicle tracks? Harper asked, her gaze sweeping the area. The fog was thick, detective, and the bank is steep here. I was focused entirely on what Rex was indicating in the water. I didn't search the immediate area further than pulling the hamper. Harper nodded, her skepticism visible. And the sheriff? Did he arrive before me? Yes, ma'am. He responded immediately after my code 30 call. The interrogation ended. Ben was excused to secure his patrol vehicle as evidence, his boots finally leaving the muddy bank. The scene was now entirely controlled by outsiders. Dale, meanwhile, was sequestered in his car, making calls, his face shielded from view. Ben retreated to his patrol car, his legs shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He stripped out of his soaking undershirt and put on a dry thermal from his emergency kit, the movement stiff and painful. He grabbed his phone. Anything, he texted Maria. The reply was instantaneous. Her house is empty, perfectly clean, not a single thing out of place. No signs of struggle. Neighbors said she was quiet, kept to herself, but had high-end visitors late at night sometimes. I have the cufflink secure. I'm digging into Dale's financials. He's had unexplained cash influxes for the last 3 months, right around the time his wife passed. Ben read the text, a sickening piece clicking into place. Dale's wife's death had been ruled natural causes, a long illness, heart failure. But the timing of the murder of Eliza Thorne, the financial troubles, the sudden volatility. What if the grief wasn't just grief? What if it was guilt? He texted back, Eliza was killed at least 36 hours ago. Strangulation. Dale claimed not to know her. Focus on the money and why he would kill her now. I'm stuck here until they process my statement. A moment later, his phone rang. It was an unknown number, blocked. He hesitated, then answered. Hello. A woman's voice, low and trembling, came across the line. Officer Carter? Is this Ben Carter? Yes, who is this? My name is Leah Thorne. I'm Eliza's younger sister. I live in Ashland, but I grew up here. I heard the news on the scanner feed. The body you found, Eliza. Her voice cracked. Did he find something? Did he say what happened? Ms. Thorne, I'm deeply sorry for your loss. The investigation is ongoing. We believe it's a homicide. I can't discuss the specifics right now. Homicide, Leah repeated, the word of flat, terrible finality. I knew it. She wouldn't just drown. She was terrified. Officer, she called me 2 days ago. She said she had evidence. She said if anything happened to her, I needed to go to the police. She said she was going to expose him. Ben leaned forward, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Expose who, Miss Thorne? There was a profound silence on the line, punctuated only by a shaky exhale. The sheriff, Dale Jensen. Eliza was his confidential informant, officer, not just his lover. She was feeding him information about a drug pipeline coming through Havenwood. But then she found something bigger, something about the money laundering. She said Dale was moving the money for the traffickers. She realized he wasn't prosecuting them. He was protecting them. She said she was going to expose him. Ben felt a dizzying wave of cold realization. Dale wasn't just covering up corruption. He was the source of it. And Eliza wasn't just a mistress. She was an informant who became a liability. And the cufflink? A piece of accidental evidence left behind during a moment of betrayal. Leah, listen to me very carefully, Ben said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Do not tell anyone you spoke to me. Do not come back to Havenwood. If Dale Jensen is involved, you are in danger. Do you have this evidence your sister spoke of? She told me where she hid it. She said she couldn't trust the sheriff, obviously, so she didn't give it to him. She hid it at the only place she knew was safe, the old family boathouse on the lake. She said she hid it inside the Compass Rose. The Compass Rose, Ben repeated, filing the words away. I know the place. Leah, I cannot contact you again. I am compromised. You must go dark. If I find this evidence, I will go directly to the state prosecutor. Promise me you won't move, won't come here. I promise, she whispered. Just promise me you won't let him get away with it. He broke her trust. He made her feel safe, and then he killed her. Ben ended the call, the receiver slippery with sweat. He looked up, his eyes immediately locking onto the silhouette of Dale Jensen, who was now standing by the patrol car, a placid, expectant look on his face. Everything all right, Carter? You look like you just saw a ghost. Ben swallowed, forcing a professional ease into his demeanor. Just the cold, Sheriff. I was drying off. My statement is complete, sir. Vance confirmed strangulation. 36 hours minimum. Dale nodded slowly. Good. We're moving the body now. You've done your part. Why don't you take Rex and go home? Get some sleep. I want you back on shift tonight. I need my best officer on the street during this chaos. Keep your ears open. Yes, sir, Ben said, the bitter irony of the title a knot in his throat. As Ben drove away from the crime scene, the convoy of official vehicles shrinking in his rear-view mirror, he knew Dale wasn't sending him home to rest. Dale was sending him home to watch him, to see if he acted suspiciously, to see if he contacted anyone. Ben drove to the edge of town, stopping at the local general store, ostensibly for coffee. He used a payphone outside, dialing Maria's number. The Compass Rose. Old Thorne family boathouse on Lake Haven. Ben told her, his voice low and urgent. Eliza was an informant. Dale was moving money for the drug traffickers she was investigating. She had evidence. That's why she died. She called her sister. A Compass Rose, the small wooden box, or a carving? Maria's voice was strained, already running through possibilities. I don't know. I'll go there. I need you to stay off the wire. Dale sent me home. He's watching. He's going to move. He can't let that evidence surface. Ben, if he killed her, he's probably already swept the boathouse, Maria warned. Then I have to move faster than the state police paperwork, and faster than a guilty sheriff. He hung up, the small, quiet sound of the receiver clicking back into the cradle, the only witness to his final descent into the shadow world of his mentor's secrets. Ben didn't go home. He drove his private truck, a battered, nondescript Ford, to the edge of Lake Haven, parking it deep in the woods. The lake, unlike the river, was clear, its surface reflecting the bruised purple of the late afternoon sky. The Thorne boathouse was a derelict structure, half-rotted pilings sinking into the water, its dock broken. It was isolated, quiet, and perfectly suited for hiding a secret. Rex whined softly, pressing against Ben's leg, his instincts once again confirming the danger. Ben slipped into the boathouse. The air was thick with the smell of mold and stagnant water. In the center of the wooden floor, worn down by decades of damp, stood a faded, painted motif, a beautiful 8-point compass rose. Ben crouched, running his fingers over the thick, peeling paint. The wood felt solid, but along the north-south axis, near the tip of the north arrow, he felt a subtle line, a seam. He pressed. Nothing. He tried prying with his knife, careful not to damage the old wood. The point didn't catch. He paused, looking at the compass rose. It's the only place she knew was safe. She was a woman who was observant, precise, and terrified. She would have hidden it in plain sight, with a lock that required knowledge, not force. Ben looked closely at the design. A traditional compass rose was marked with points for the cardinal directions. North, east, southwest. N-E. SW. He looked again at the tips of the 4 main arrows. He pressed them in sequence. NSEW. A soft click echoed in the stillness. The north arrow of the compass rose, lifted slightly. Beneath it was a shallow compartment lined with velvet. Inside, secured by a rubber band, was a small, encrypted USB drive. Ben grabbed the drive, his heart hammering. He looked around the quiet, deserted boathouse, a sudden, cold premonition washing over him. He was not alone. A floorboard creaked above him, near the entrance. Ben froze, dropping low behind an overturned tackle box. Rex, having followed him in, let out a low, menacing growl. "Rex, quiet," Ben whispered, drawing his sidearm. A figure stepped into the weak light, filtering through the dock slats. It was Dale Jensen. He stood in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the light, his face shadowed. He wasn't wearing his uniform. He was in a dark windbreaker, jeans, and tactical boots. He was holding a large, heavy-gauge cable cutter in his right hand. "I knew you wouldn't be able to stay away, Ben." Dale's voice was soft, laced with tired, terrible sadness. "You always were too good a cop to take my advice." The silence that followed Dale Jensen's appearance was suffocating, thick with the smell of stagnant water and betrayal. Ben remained low behind the warped wood. The USB drive clutched tightly in his hand, his weapon trained on the sheriff's dark silhouette. Rex, vibrating with contained aggression, crouched beside him, a low, continuous rumble coming from his chest. "Dale," Ben said, his voice low despite the frantic pounding in his ribs. "It didn't have to come to this. We found the evidence. Why didn't you just turn yourself in? You could have saved yourself." Dale took a step into the boathouse, the heavy cable cutters swinging loosely in his grip. The gesture was casual, terrifying. "Save myself? From what, Ben? From the humiliation of being exposed by a girl who thought she could be a hero? From a town that thinks I'm still the hero who stood by my sick wife until the end." He scoffed, a dry, bitter sound. "You think you know what's going on, don't you? You think this is some simple case of a sheriff covering up a murder after a fling went bad. You think I loved Eliza." "The photo in the bag suggests you did," Ben countered, rising slightly, keeping Rex between them. "Love? Maybe. She was fire, Ben, and she was a good ear. After Sarah died, the silence in my house was deafening. Eliza filled it, but she was never just a mistress. She was always the informant. And when she started digging, she dug too deep. She started talking about the Stone House Group." The name hit Ben like a physical blow. The Stone House Group was not just a small-time drug operation everyone suspected. It was an interstate trafficking and money laundering enterprise that had been operating in the shadows of the valley for decades, untouchable. "You're working for them, aren't you?" Ben's voice was heavy with disbelief. "All those unsolved disappearances over the years. You were cleaning up for them." "I was protecting Havenwood." Dale roared, the quiet grief fracturing into raw rage. "You think those snakes would leave this valley alone if I didn't give them a small piece? If I didn't run interference? I took their money. Yes, but I kept the peace. I kept the worst of the violence out. Eliza was going to expose the whole operation, me included, and then the Stone House Group would descend, Ben. They don't just kill one person. They burn towns to the ground to cover their tracks. I killed Eliza to save Havenwood and to save you. You killed her because she was going to expose you as a criminal." Ben spat, the taste of disillusionment acrid in his mouth. "And you left your cufflink there, a deliberate signature? Did you want to be caught, Dale?" Dale stared at him, his expression suddenly vacant. "The cufflink was an accident. I wasn't thinking. I was tired. Sarah had died 3 weeks before that. I was barely sleeping. Eliza came to my house. She saw the ledger, the names, the dates. She saw that the money I was moving was coming from the same accounts that paid for Sarah's palliative care." Ben felt his blood run cold. "Sarah's death was natural causes." "It was not," Dale whispered, his eyes finally showing the terrible truth of his soul. "Sarah was suffering. She wanted to go. We talked about it for weeks. She wrote a letter confirming her wish. I gave her the injection myself. I did it out of love, Ben. a compassionate murder. And I used the Stonehouse money to pay off the doctors who signed the death certificate without an autopsy. Eliza found the payment receipts. The shocking twist, the betrayal of Dale's own wife, cloaked as compassion, and the subsequent cover-up funded by cartel money, snapped the narrative into a terrifying focus. Eliza hadn't just found evidence of Dale's corruption. She had found evidence of his double homicide. She had the drive, didn't she? Ben said, his voice flat. The ledger, the accounts, the receipts for Sarah's doctors. That's what's on this. He held up the USB drive. Dale didn't deny it. He took another step forward. Give me the drive, Ben. Let me fix this one last time. I'll make sure the state police find the real killer, some drifter, some drug addict. You can go back to being the good cop. You can have Maria back. I'll make sure the truth dies here. No, Ben said, stepping out from behind the box, raising his gun fully. Rex immediately lunged forward, stopping inches from Ben's feet, a terrifying protective wall. I can't. This isn't about protecting a town, Dale. This is about covering up a choice you made to murder 2 women, one out of love, one out of desperation. And I won't be complicit. Dale's face hardened. The last vestiges of the men Ben had known vanishing. You leave me no choice, Officer Carter. He lunged, not with the cable cutters, but with his left hand, flicking something sharp and metallic out of his sleeve. Ben instinctively pulled the trigger, a deafening crack that echoed to the quiet woods. The bullet missed. Dale, moving with surprising speed, ducked behind a wooden post, throwing the small, sharp object he'd been holding. It was a fishing knife. Ben ducked as a knife whizzed past his head, embedding itself with a sickening thwack into the wood behind him. Rex, his training taking over, launched himself toward the sound of Dale's position. Rex, no. Ben yelled. He didn't want the dog hurt. Rex slammed into the wooden post. Dale, seizing the moment, brought the heavy cable cutters down in a vicious, sweeping arc. It struck Rex on the shoulder, the dull impact sickeningly loud. Rex cried out, a sound of pain and surprise, and stumbled backward, whimpering. You hurt my dog, Ben snarled, all professionalism gone. He fired again, aiming low. The bullet tore into the floorboards near Dale's feet, sending splinters flying. Dale scrambled back, retreating deeper into the boathouse's shadows, toward a back window that overlooked the woods. Ben rushed to Rex. The dog was favoring his front leg, but his eyes were still locked on Dale's retreating figure. Stay, boy. Stay. Ben pursued, running low. Dale was already through the broken window, clambering over the sill. Ben reached the opening and peered out, gun ready. Dale was running toward the thick woods, a black shape melting into the twilight. Ben took aim, his sight steady on the back of the sheriff's jacket. He could take the shot. He should take the shot. Dale was a double murderer, a cartel informant, and an armed fugitive. But Ben's finger froze on the trigger. He wasn't a killer. He was an officer of the law. He had the evidence. The USB drive felt heavy and real in his pocket. He wouldn't sink to Dale's level. He lowered the weapon. He's running, Ben whispered to the darkening air. He's running, and I have the key. Ben turned back, checking on Rex. The dog whined, leaning against Ben's leg. The wound wasn't deep, just a heavy, bruising blow. He picked up his phone and didn't call dispatch. He called Detective Harper's direct line. Detective Harper, this is Officer Ben Carter. I need to report a situation. Sheriff Dale Jensen is an armed fugitive. He just tried to kill me at the Thorne family boathouse on Lake Haven. And I have the evidence you need. All of it. Epilogue, the lingering impact. The next 72 hours were a blur of intense interrogation, forensic sweeps of the boathouse, and an urgent, statewide manhunt for Dale Jensen. Ben turned over the USB drive to Detective Harper. The data was damning. Digital copies of Stonehouse Group's ledgers, detailing transactions paid directly into Dale's hidden accounts, the receipts of the doctors who signed Sarah Jensen's death certificate, and, most damningly, a voice note from Eliza Thorne, recorded days before her death, outlining her terror and her certainty that Dale was going to kill her. Maria, using the cufflink as her opening wedge, broke the story on the front page of the Havenwood Courier, shattering the town's quiet facade forever. The headline read, Sheriff exposed AS cartel operative. Murderer IN wife's death. The end of the story wasn't cinematic. There was no final, tearful confrontation. Dale Jensen was cornered 3 days later, 50 miles north of Havenwood, in a rundown cabin where he'd attempted to make contact with his Stonehouse handlers. He didn't resist arrest. He simply handed over his weapon, his expression having settled into that same terrible, weary resignation Ben had first witnessed at the river. Ben didn't see him again until the preliminary hearing. Dale looked smaller, defeated, his uniform replaced by an orange jumpsuit. He caught Ben's eye across the courtroom. Dale didn't glare or apologize. He simply offered a brief, painful nod, a silent acknowledgement of the shattered truth and the path Ben had chosen. Months later, the town of Havenwood was still reeling. A new sheriff was appointed. The corruption was slowly being purged, and the Stonehouse Group's network was dismantled, largely thanks to the evidence Eliza Thorne had died to protect. Ben was clear of any wrongdoing by internal affairs, though his unauthorized actions were noted in his file. He had betrayed procedure, but he had served justice. He was given a promotion to detective. One quiet Saturday evening, Ben was sitting on his porch, polishing his new badge. Rex, fully healed, was curled at his feet. The silence felt different now. Not empty, but earned. Maria pulled up the driveway. She had a copy of her latest article. She didn't talk about the case. She sat beside him, handing him a mug of coffee. "The town is starting to heal," she said softly, watching the twilight settle over the valley. "It will take a long time," Ben replied, looking at his K-9 partner, who symbolized all the loyalty and simple truth the human world seemed to lack. "We'll be here," Maria said, leaning her head briefly on his shoulder. "We're still here, Ben." The broken trust between Ben and Dale had been a terrible, necessary wound. But out of the wreckage, the cold river, the hidden cufflink, the silence informant, a different kind of trust was slowly, tentatively being rebuilt. A trust founded not on blind loyalty, but on shared, painful truth. Ben reached out and gently rested his hand on Rex's warm, solid head. The quiet resolution wasn't the relief of a victory, but the profound, lingering emotional impact of surviving the worst kind of betrayal and choosing the harder, cleaner path toward the light.